My guest today says that mobile internet access costs 20 to 60 times more than fixed and cable. So are mobile prices driving consumers to Wi-Fi? We'll ask Kyung Mun, Principal Strategist at Mobile Experts, in just a moment. Join us. Hello, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of Wi-Fi Now TV. My name is Claus Hetting, and this is the show that brings you all the stories and not least all the great people from across the Wi-Fi industry. So today we'll be talking about fixed mobile convergence and competition as well with Mobile Experts Principal Strategist Kyung Mun. And he's written a great piece of analysis on the premium price on mobile services compared to fixed. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in just a second. And we're going to speculate a bit on the impact of that. So that's a super interesting discussion we're going to have in a moment. Before I do that, I want to make sure that you know that we're taking Wi-Fi Now, the expo and conference, to London, UK, this October 25th to 27th. And not only that, we're also having an addition to our Wi-Fi Now program, and that's the Wi-Fi Now Awards. And that show will happen in London. We're already inviting all the great Wi-Fi companies out there, including yourselves out there listening and watching, to enter the Wi-Fi Now Awards. We have all of 5 categories for you, so check out our event program and find out more about the awards at wifinow.international. And as usual, if you have any questions, I'm always delighted to hear from you. My email is klaus@wifinow.events.com. So that's it for my announcements for this week. And I'm delighted to present my guest for this week. His name is Kyung Mun, and he's Principal Strategist for the consultants, I guess, at Mobile Experts. And Kyung, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Klaus.
Good to see you. And we're going to talk about an analysis piece that you did for Mobile Experts. It was also brought on other media. And let's just cut straight to the main story. Can you tell us a bit about your study on mobile versus fixed internet access pricing? And this applies, I believe, your story applies to the United States in this case.
Right. So we've been looking at this, aspect of a mobile versus a fixed. As you know, the Mobile Experts is a independent market analyst firm, and we'll be looking at the mobile infrastructure and handsets. And obviously, as it relates to that, we have to understand what is going on in the services sector, and that has a huge impact on how the operators are spending their capital budgets and such things. So we want to kind of understand the dynamics between how the consumers are valuing the fixed broadband services as compared to the mobile broadband services as well. So we wanted to look at that in terms of $1 per gigabyte consumed, in terms of both the service plan that allows certain amounts to be allotted for the mobile plan versus the fixed. And we were using that particular metric to see what the comparable $1 per gigabyte is in terms of both the service allotment as well as the actual usage.
And the results you came up with, in my view, were, I think I had a sense that, the premium on mobile is big, but I mean, these numbers are to some extent staggering. One method used was that gave the result that mobile is 20 times more expensive. The other method gave the result it's 60 times more expensive. Just comment on that. And also, by the way, when you say fixed, I'm also kind of counting Wi-Fi into that category, since Wi-Fi is fairly small investment on top of fixed network infrastructure. But can you comment on the 20 times more and the 60 times more?
Sure. The 60 times more is compared to how much the fixed and mobile data allotment is, meaning that the service providers has allotted certain amounts of data buckets, if you will, for a certain amount of dollar value. So obviously, I think that today the mobile product versus a fixed is a very different things today. So what we're trying to do there was to look at kind of an apples to apples comparison with respect to looking at the amount of dollar versus the amount of the data bucket that's been assigned. So if you look at that, the 20 times premium is reflecting the fact that you have the actual usage of the data. Now, this is the average usage, so you have a wide spectrum of people who tend to use a lot more versus some people who tend to use less. But on average number is a kind of a statistical value we use to say, on average value, what we're seeing is that based on the kind of current monthly usage of the smartphone users, typically these are kind of the postpaid users, the amount of usage they have compared to the amount of dollar they get, that's the premium that you would have relative to the usage. Now the 60 times is in terms of the bucket that's assigned. Now, if you look at the wide spectrum of usage, most people, you could argue, do not use up the entire bucket that's assigned. So you see these new programs of the operators in the United States specifically, where they're doing these concepts of carryover.
Right, and well, regardless of whether it's the 20 times or the 60 times number, these are remarkable numbers. So what do you think has been driving the massive premium on mobile? And in many cases, if you look at just wireless access, you get a lot of the same service essentially, and the same often the same quality experience on Wi-Fi, right?
Right. I think what we used in this particular analysis, we looked at the dollar per gigabyte consumed or used. But I guess you could define mobility in a very wider context. So you could think of mobility in terms of both, concepts like seamless authentication, seamless handover, the fact that mobile services, this concept of is ubiquitously available anywhere. So I think those are the premiums that consumers value, and that's how the operators are pricing it as such that all these other aspects of mobility are lumped into this price that's reflecting how consumers value that particular service. So I think we have to look at it in the context that it's not just the amount of data tonnage that this authentication, automatic handover. These are the aspects that are lumped into the concept of mobility premium.
Right, and so the next question is whether this premium is sustainable, and if not, will the cost of mobile services need to be reduced? And of course, there's tremendous competition right now, at least competition for traffic, which has been won essentially right now, hands down, by Wi-Fi, because so much of the traffic is going over Wi-Fi. But can the mobile industry sustain this premium? What's your view?
Yeah, I think that question goes back to how the consumers are valuing these different aspects about the service, the mobile service. I think we could look at the mobile service in the multiple vectors. One is that this kind of a consistency of the experience the user gets. The fact that user can have this kind of seamless authentication handover, and all those aspects are lumped into the mobility. So as long as the mobile operators or mobile service providers can continue to push that boundary or provide a seamless experience, I think they can continue to price it such that they can have this premium over fixed access. As you said, competition is very fierce in the mobile market, as we know. And I think that will naturally, competitive dynamics will naturally drive this, what we call dollar per gigabyte, continuously down, not just on the mobile side, but also on the fixed side as well. So I think it's a question of, can you continue to distinguish the services, the mobile services, with respect to the fixed-based service, like a Wi-Fi, for example.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about convergence, because I've been, trying to promote this for a long time also in terms of Wi-Fi and mobile convergence, fixed mobile convergence. I suppose is just another, in many ways, another term for that. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about what you think are the technical and strategic options for mobile fixed convergence, because to me, it would seem fairly obvious that we should be going in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Comment on that also, if you will.
Right. I think you see some of that dynamic happening in Europe, right? So European market is probably, one can argue, more fierce in terms of competitive dynamics concerned. So I think you have some notions of, as people are going to be making economic choices about what kind of service they want in terms of fixed broadband services as well as the mobile services, they're going to make this economic choice because at the end of the day, consumers have limited dollars that they need to make a choice around what is important to them. So I think this is where you have this kind of the dynamics of fixed versus a mobile convergence potentially happening. But I think for a user to really partake that, you have to provide this, what we talked about earlier, having this, what we kind of lump into terms of a mobile services around seamless authentication, handover, and the fact that that service bundle can provide both the tonnage and the notional mobility, right? I think of mobility as more of an insurance policy, if you will, because as you and I know, most of us people tend to use their mobile access, mobile data, or data services in general, more of a kind of a stationary environment. Let's say, you could argue 80% or 90%, those 5 to 10% where the user might be truly in a highly mobile situation, that's where you really could take advantage of the mobile services. But people are willing to pay the premium because it's like an insurance policy, right? You seldom use it, but it's nice to have it when you need it. So I think that's the kind of dynamics that's going to be playing out.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. And by the way, I totally agree with that. It's a really good analysis, Kyung. So let's talk a little bit about the future role of 5G, whatever 5G may be. I have to remind everybody out there, we still don't really know what it is because it,
right.
at least to my knowledge, has not been defined very clearly. And possibly also the role of LTEU/LAA, so LTE and unlicensed bands. What do you think might be the role of these two technologies in driving down the cost of mobile access to a perhaps more comparable level to what we're seeing with fixed access?
Right. I think, as we look at 5G, as you mentioned, we don't know exactly what 5G is, but at least the requirements or the pundits talking about the types of services that will be coming forth with 5G technologies. One can imagine it will be large throughput capacity that will be delivered to the users. And you can also think of it in terms of very low latency as another requirement that seems to be driving the 5G services. End of the day, as you think about more and more capacity coming down the pipe, you can imagine that the dollar per gigabyte will go down. So we'll continue to see this, cost trend coming down, and 5G will certainly be part of that as people think about using much higher spectrum where there's a large swath of relatively unused spectrum. So you could think of that as being a large amounts of capacity that's coming down. So it would definitely bring the cost dollar per gigabyte number down. With respect to the unlicensed LTU and LAA, it's another avenue, right? Another avenue for operators to take advantage of, cheaper or free spectrum. So, obviously spectrum is a big cost component of any operation. So, being able to tap into a quote, free or share or low cost spectrum is certainly part of the equation to bring the dollar per gigabyte metric downward. In fact, we just did we just completed a study on LTU and its impact with respect to our carrier Wi-Fi study that we do every year.
Right, and a very good answer, by the way, and very comprehensive one. So I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that you mentioned in your blog, which is there could be OTT type service providers out there that may want to take on this disparity between, in the cost of mobile versus fixed. And as we already discussed, this disparity is really significant. So I would say that might be an opportunity for other types of service providers. And you obviously mentioned that in your blog as well. But who would be likely candidates to take on this issue and offer a cheaper mobile or mobile-like service? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Right. I think, besides the kind of a traditional service providers, whether we look at the mobile operators or fixed providers, and I think obviously, telecom space is all about scale. So obviously you need a very large scale to drive down the cost. But I think another aspect is, I think as you kind of pointed out, alluded to in your question, is that, player who may have a different motivations or expectations around profit, I think they could have a very different motivations to really take on this kind of challenge because, when you look at the traditional telecom providers, they have a certain profit expectation. So their business models and business drivers are kind of marching towards that particular cadence of meeting certain profit expectations. So, but if you were to have a new over-the-top type of player who are web scale players who almost have one could argue, almost a global scale, certainly those type of players can bring that scale to bear and provide these kind of services. But end of the day, obviously, we would need to make sure that those providers have certain level of owner economics, being able to facilitate having the facilities or facility-based type of a network so they can control more of the destiny, barring any kind of regulatory intervention into the marketplace.
Right, exactly. So what you're, I think, referring to is the idea that if a major internet company, for example, and we all know more or less who they would be, could, shall we say, gain or monetize, economically gain, of course, or monetize the service through, shall we say, the presence that they have already, the global presence, then the economics of actually building the network would be, and providing the service would be completely different than what we've traditionally seen with carriers, right? That's your point, kind of, right?
Right. So, I mean, I think you kind of nailed it on the head, right? So, I mean, traditional telecom providers have certain expectations around profit because the kind of main motivations around having a facility-based network services. As to your earlier questions about 5G, right? So these providers have motivations, obviously, to make an investment and offer different types of services, so they can really monetize that kind of a singular investment over multiple types of services. Obviously, that makes a very tremendous logical economic sense. At the same time, you have kind of over-the-top players who may have different motivations or different economics around what they want to get out of this kind of a telecom-based services. So I think that's sort of going to be an interesting dynamic that may play out. But obviously, this type of a large-scale business will take a very long time to play out. So we need to see how the market will develop over time. And certainly, I think operators, to your earlier point, want to take advantage of different technologies that provide better unit cost of delivering a bit from one point to another. And whether as you deliver those bits, we could provide that mobility experience as well as kind of a fixed broadband experience where your consumers have expectations to really receive or be able to tap a kind of unlimited resource amounts of tonnage of data, right? So I think a provider can provide that both aspects will certainly will definitely tap into what I would call kind of pent up demand, right? Because at the end of the day, people want to have a peace of mind when they access mobile broadband or fixed broadband for that matter.
Kyung, it's great to have you on the show. My only last question to you is, if people want to know more about Mobile Experts, well, what is the website?
Our website is www.mobile-experts.net.
.net. Okay, great stuff. And there's a lot of great stuff on the website, by the way, that I just had the pleasure of looking at before doing this interview. So it's great to have you on, Kyung, and we will be delighted. I'll be following this. We'll be delighted to have you back at another time.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right, everybody, that's it for this week's show. Next week, I will be interviewing another great Wi-Fi guest. I do not know just yet who that's going to be, but I think I've got some ideas. And so all you have to do is come back and find out. And don't forget to go to wifinow.international to register for our London conference, where you will get to meet lots of Wi-Fi leaders, and a lot of passionate people always get involved in that. So make sure you check it out. So that's it for today. See you next week.
Wi-Fi Now is a production of RCR TV News. To suggest a show topic or to learn more about Wi-Fi Now events, you can reach Claus Hetting at klaus@hettingconsulting.com. To find out more about Wi-Fi Now and all things wireless, visit rcrwireless.com.